I used to think love was something you earned by being careful. I remember watching myself the way other people watched me. I learned what to say by listening for what made the room relax. I was good at it. I was praised for being calm, for not needing much, for knowing when to stop talking. Adults smiled when I nodded. They called me mature. They said I was a blessing. I didn't feel scared. That's what I tell myself now. I felt steady. I felt chosen when I did things right and invisible when I didn't, and I thought that was normal. I learned early that silence fixed things faster than questions. Silence kept everyone comfortable. Silence kept me close. Even now, when no one is watching, I still wait for permission before I speak. And when I don't get it, I tell myself I wasn't supposed to talk anyway. I grew up learning how to read rooms before I learned how to read books. I remember knowing when my father's shoulders were tight and when my mother's smile meant yes or meant later. No one taught me this out loud. It just became part of me. Love in my house was never loud. It was neat. It showed up after you did the right thing. If I followed instructions the first time, affection came easily. If I hesitated, it cooled. No one said that was what was happening, but I felt it in the way conversations shortened and hands stayed busy. I learned not to interrupt prayers. I learned not to ask questions that made adults glance at each other. I learned how to look interested without actually wanting anything. They called me obedient. They said I had a sweet spirit. I didn't know that meant quiet. I just knew it felt good to be approved of. At church, adults touched my shoulder when they passed me. It was light. It meant I was seen. When I spoke too much in Sunday school, the teacher didn't scold me. She smiled and moved on without answering. The lesson kept going. My face burned, but no one noticed. That was how correction worked. Not sharp, cruel, just absence. At home, praise came in small pieces. A nod, a sentence said in front of company. She's so easy. She never gives us trouble. I remember standing very still when they said those things. I didn't want to move and ruin it. I didn't want to prove them wrong. I started to believe being loved meant being low maintenance. Being loved meant not having needs that slowed anyone down. Being loved meant fitting inside expectations without stretching them. When I felt upset, I swallowed it. Not because I was told to, because I didn't want to risk the quiet approval that wrapped around me when I behaved correctly. Purity talks came later. They weren't shouted. They were careful. My mother explained things while folding laundry. Her voice stayed even. She talked about responsibility and reputation and how easily girls could make mistakes without meaning to. I nodded. I always nodded. I didn't ask why boys weren't part of those conversations. I didn't ask what happened if someone made a mistake anyway. I already knew questions shifted the atmosphere. At school, teachers liked me. I did my work. I didn't challenge instructions. Friends told me secrets because they knew I wouldn't repeat them. I didn't realize at the time that this was another form of silence. I just thought I was trustworthy. At night, I replayed conversations in my head. I checked for moments where I might have crossed a line. I imagined how they could have gone better if I had said less. Sometimes I wondered what would happen if I told the truth about how I felt. The thought never lasted long. It felt dangerous in a way I couldn't explain. Love in my world had rules. They weren't written down. They lived in the air. You could feel when someone broke one. The room tightened. Voices softened in a way that wasn't kind. I remember a girl at church who cried during a youth meeting. She asked a question about forgiveness that went on too long. The leader prayed instead of answering. Afterward, adults talked about her like she wasn't there. She's struggling. She needs guidance. I learned something that night without being told. Struggle made you separate. Struggle made you a project. I didn't want to be a project. So I became agreeable. I became flexible. I became skilled at turning feelings into something manageable before anyone else noticed them. I told myself I was lucky. My parents weren't cruel. No one hit me. No one yelled. That thought kept me quiet when other thoughts tried to surface. It felt wrong to complain about a life that looked so good from the outside. When adults asked how I was doing, I said, good, without thinking. The word came automatically. It fit better than anything else. Sometimes when I was alone, I felt something press against my chest. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was more like holding my breath without realizing it. I prayed about it. I asked God to help me be better, more grateful, more content. Those prayers felt safe because they asked nothing of anyone else. They only asked me to change. As I got older, praise came with expectations attached. Being a good example, being modest, being respectful. I didn't know where my limits were because no one had ever asked me what they were. I only knew what pleased other people. I learned to smile when corrected. I learned to apologize even when I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. Apologies smoothed things over quickly. Inside, something small began to crack. Not loudly, not all at once. It cracked in the space between what I felt and what I was allowed to say. It cracked every time silence was rewarded and honesty felt risky. I didn't call it pain, I called it discipline. By the time I reached my early teens, I understood the system clearly. Love arrived when I complied. Distance arrived when I didn't. I told myself this was how families worked. This was how faith worked. This was how growing up worked. The thought that it could be different never fully formed. It stayed half-made, like a sentence I stopped myself from finishing. The first time I felt the urge to speak and didn't, it scared me. Not because of what I wanted to say, but because of how quickly I buried it. I realized then that silence wasn't just something I practiced. It was something I was becoming. And when someone praised me again for being so easy, I smiled. I felt relief wash through me, felt safe. But underneath that safety, something tightened. I didn't understand it yet. I only knew I couldn't afford to loosen my grip on who I was supposed to be. Not if I wanted to stay loved. By the time I understood that silence was a choice, it was already a habit. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to protect myself that way. It had grown into me slowly, like posture. I held myself still without thinking. Middle school brought new rules that no one wrote down. Bodies changed, attention shifted. I learned quickly that attention wasn't neutral. It carried weight. It followed you. At church, adults started speaking to me differently, still kind, still calm, but more careful. Compliments landed on my appearance instead of my behavior. "You're growing into such a lovely young woman." They said it the same way they talked about responsibility. I felt watched in a way I hadn't before, not threatened. Measured, youth group separated us by gender. The girls met in a smaller room. The chairs were closer together. We talked about modesty and intention and guarding our hearts. The leader spoke softly. Her voice never rose. She said purity was a gift you gave once. She said protecting it was our responsibility. She didn't say what happened if it was taken. I sat still and listened. I always listened. One night, a girl asked what to do if something had already happened. Her voice shook. The room went quiet. The leader paused. She said, "God forgives." Then she moved on. No one followed up. No one asked questions. The lesson continued. I felt something cold move through me. I didn't know why. After that, I paid closer attention. I noticed who was included easily and who wasn't. I noticed how quickly warmth could cool. Girls who laughed too loud were pulled aside. Girls who cried too much became topics of prayer. Girls who stayed quiet were trusted. Trust felt like safety. I wanted safety. Around that time, someone I knew began to change. She stopped coming to youth group regularly. When she did show up, people looked at her differently. No one said anything directly. They didn't have to. I heard whispers in the hallway. "She's having a hard time." She made some choices. Choices was the word they used. Sat heavy. I didn't know exactly what had happened. I didn't ask. One afternoon, she found me alone in the fellowship hall. She closed the door halfway behind her. She looked tired. She asked if she could talk. I said yes. She told me something that made my stomach drop. Her words came out fast, like she was afraid of running out of time. She said she didn't know what to do. She said she felt invisible. She said she wished someone would just listen. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, she looked at me like she was waiting for something. Advice, reassurance. I didn't know what to give her. I only knew what silence had taught me. I told her I was sorry. I told her I would pray for her. My voice sounded calm. She nodded, but her face fell in a way I couldn't ignore. I felt it then, the weight of what I wasn't saying. After she left, I sat alone for a long time. My chest felt tight. I told myself I'd done the right thing. I didn't tell anyone what she said. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't know how to speak without changing everything. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself adults would see if something was wrong. I told myself silence kept me safe. Weeks later, she stopped coming altogether. No announcement, no explanation. During prayer requests, someone mentioned her name. They asked for guidance and healing. The room hummed with agreement. No one said what she needed healing from. No one said why she was gone. I sat there with my hands folded. My heart beat hard against my ribs. I realized something then that I couldn't undo. Silence didn't just protect me. It protected the structure. I started noticing my body more after that. How my shoulders tensed when someone asked questions. How my throat closed when I thought about speaking up. I practiced answers in my head and discarded them. Too emotional, too complicated. At home, things stayed calm. My parents praised my maturity. They trusted me. Trust felt good. It also felt like a trap I couldn't see the edges of. I became more careful. I chose words that couldn't be misunderstood. I avoided situations that might require explanations. One night during a family discussion, my father said something about obedience. He wasn't angry. He was firm. He said structure kept people safe. He said rules existed for a reason. I felt my mouth open, then close. I had a question. It stayed inside me. Later, alone in my room, I stared at the ceiling. My thoughts moved in circles. I wondered what would happen if I spoke and was wrong. I imagined the room going quiet. I imagined disappointment settling in faces I loved. That image was enough to stop me. I prayed again. I asked God to help me trust. I didn't ask Him to help me speak. The pressure built quietly. It showed up as headaches, as exhaustion. I told myself I was just tired. I told myself everyone felt this way. At school, teachers continued to praise me. Friends leaned on me. I absorbed their fears and secrets. I didn't share my own. I didn't know how. The moment I crossed a line came without warning. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It happened when another girl pulled me aside after class. She asked if I thought something was wrong with her. She asked if she should tell someone. I saw myself in her face. The fear, the hope. I knew what the safe answer was. I also knew what the honest one was. I felt my heart pound. I felt my body choose before my mind did. I told her to pray about it. I told her to be careful. I told her to trust authority. The words left my mouth easily. They sounded right. She thanked me. She walked away. I stood there hollow. Something inside me split. I understood then that I wasn't just silent. I was participating. That was the moment I couldn't go back from. Not because I had done something illegal or dramatic, because I had chosen belonging over truth. I went home that day and sat on my bed without turning on the light. The room felt heavy. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I felt numb. I realized silence had stopped being protection. It had become alignment, and once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I thought something would happen after that. Some shift, some punishment. Nothing did. Life kept moving the way it always had. Church services, school days, family dinners. People still trusted me. They still smiled when I spoke. They still said my name with confidence. That was the first consequence I noticed. Silence didn't cost me anything right away. Paid me. I was chosen more often after that, asked to help, asked to lead small things. Adults said I had discernment. They said I was wise beyond my years. I felt sick when they said it. I started to understand that being safe wasn't the same as being good. But I didn't know how to separate the two. They were tangled together inside me. I carried what I knew quietly. I told myself I was protecting people. I told myself I was preventing chaos. Those explanations worked during the day. At night they unraveled. I lay awake, listening to the house breathe. I replayed conversations I hadn't had. I imagined words I never said landing badly. Sometimes I pictured myself speaking clearly. The room didn't explode, but faces changed. That was enough to stop the fantasy. As I got older, the rules followed me. They just changed clothes. At college, professors praised me for being composed. Friends called me grounded. They came to me when they needed advice. I gave careful answers. Answers that didn't take sides. Answers that kept me neutral. Neutral felt safe. Neutral felt familiar. When someone told me something difficult, I listened. I nodded. I didn't interrupt. I could feel when they wanted more from me. Guidance, validation. I stayed careful. I stayed quiet. People thanked me for understanding. They said I made them feel heard. I wondered if that was true, or if I was just good at absorbing without reflecting anything back. I dated men who liked how easy I was. They said I didn't demand much. They said I was low drama. I agreed, out loud and inside. When something bothered me, I adjusted myself instead of the situation. I told myself relationships required compromise. I never asked how much. Once, a man said something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't cruel. It was dismissive. I felt the familiar pause inside me, the moment where I could speak. I didn't. Later, he apologized for something else. He hugged me. He said he appreciated how understanding I was. I felt that old relief. I also felt the tightness. The pattern was clear by then. Silence smoothed things over. Silence kept me chosen. The cost showed up in smaller ways. I forgot what I actually thought about things. I hesitated before answering simple questions. What do you want? "Where should we go? Does this bother you?" I said, "I don't know a lot." Sometimes it was true, sometimes it was safer. I became someone people trusted with responsibility, not with truth. I didn't talk about faith much anymore. I still believed. I just kept it contained. I noticed how quickly my body reacted to tension. My shoulders lifted, my jaw clenched. I could feel when silence was expected. I could feel when honesty would be inconvenient. I told myself everyone made these calculations. I told myself this was adulthood. Then something small happened, small enough that no one else noticed. A coworker came to me upset. She said something unfair had happened. She asked what I thought. I felt the answer form immediately. Clear? Certain. I swallowed it. I gave her a softer version. A version that didn't accuse anyone. A version that suggested patience. She listened. She nodded. She didn't look relieved. She looked resigned. That look stayed with me. I started seeing it everywhere. In mirrors, in photos, it was the look of someone who learned to lower their expectations quietly. I didn't feel proud of myself anymore. I felt hollow. Still, I didn't change. Knowing something and doing something are different skills. When I finally left home for good, no one fought me. No dramatic exit. No confrontation. They hugged me. They said they were proud. I felt light driving away, then ashamed for feeling light. Distance didn't undo the training. It followed me. In meetings, I waited to speak until others had gone first. In friendships, I checked my tone carefully. In conflict, I defaulted to understanding without accountability, empathy without boundaries. People liked me. They still do. Sometimes I wonder if they know me. Sometimes I'm not sure I do. I don't think my parents meant to teach me this. I don't think the church planned it. That makes it harder to name. There's no single moment to point to, no line to cross back over, just a long practice of staying quiet when staying quiet worked. I don't hate where I come from. That's the part that confuses people. I loved my family. I still do. I believe they loved me. I just don't know what they would have done with my full voice. I still catch myself editing before I speak, still feel that pause. Sometimes I push through it, sometimes I don't. There are days when silence feels like a betrayal. There are days when it feels like mercy. I don't know how to untangle the difference yet. What I do know is this: I was very good at being loved. I just don't know how much of that love required me to disappear.